What's up, booktube? It's Leah Cooper, and today I'm bringing you my July reading wrap up. So July was a pretty good month. Actually, it was a very good month. I almost read 3,000 pages, which is kind of my stretch goal every month. Love to see it, rarely hit it. I would also say that in July I did a pretty good job of getting through most of the things on my TBR, which is always kind of it's always obviously my goal to get through everything on my TBR, but some months I just really fail at it. But let's talk about the things that I read. We'll see if I can get through this without my allergies acting up. So the first thing I finished in July, I finished right at the beginning of the month because I almost finished it in June. That was Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. So this was one of my 20 books to read in 2020 picks. I picked it on my TBR jar in June, right? Hopefully. And it just took me a little bit longer to read than I had planned. Initially, when I started reading this, I really struggled. So if you're not familiar, Cloud Atlas is David Mitchell's sci-fi novel that has multiple, it's basically, there's like 7 different perspectives, 7 different timelines, something like that. And you move forward in time into the far future, and then you move backward in time through the same perspectives, finishing up their story. The book is laid out a little bit more linearly than the movie is, if you're familiar with the film. But anyways, I was really struggling with the first 2 timelines in this book. They're the 2 oldest timelines, and while I really like them in the film, they just weren't to my taste in the book. And I almost DNF'd this, but I decided to give it like a little bit more of a chance. And the 3rd timeline completely grabbed my interest, and I was hooked through the rest of the book. So I won't lie, it took me like 100 pages to get into this, but then I was like really into it. I think I ended up giving this like a 4.5 stars. Yes, I gave this 4.5 stars. I think it's really good. If you like the film, if you like the concept, I do think it's worth reading. There are things that are different in the book to the film. I think some things the film does better and some things the book does better, and so I think they're both worth consuming together if you like the story. So yeah, I'm glad to have finally read this and to get this off my TBR. The next thing I finished in July was like the only audiobook I've listened to recently. I'm shocked. I'm actually shocked, but apparently if I'm not commuting, if I'm just staying at home, I don't really listen to audiobooks. They have become such like an integral part of my reading this past year with work and everything. Like I think like something like 28% of my books were coming from audio, but since I lost my job and quarantine, staying at home, I don't listen to them anymore. It's a bit sad. But anyways, the one I did finish this month was Arabella of Mars by David D. Levine. I'd been listening to this through most of June. Finished this at the beginning of July. I gave it 4 stars. Yes, gave it 4 stars. Really enjoyed it. This is a steampunk, I don't want to say fantasy of manners, because there's really nothing fantasy about this. It really is a science fiction steampunk story. It takes place in kind of a alternate past where we can sail between planets, and like on sail ships that use like currents and gravity and stuff. And there's Imperial British colonization of Mars, and our protagonist Arabella is she's sent home to Earth with her mother because her mother wants to raise her as a proper lady, and that's not going to happen on Mars. Then her father dies and her brother inherits their estate on Mars, and then something happens to cause her to need to hitch a ride as fast as possible to get back to Mars. So to do that, she disguises herself as a boy and is hired on as a cabin's boy to this captain of a commercial merchant ship. And there's a lot of it's not high seas because it's taking place in space, sort of, but yeah, high seas adventures. It's very much science steampunk, and it has the elements of fantasy of manners, but no fantastical elements. I guess it's a little bit like the Lady Trent series in that respect, which is definitely fantasy and manners, but there's actually no fantasy elements. It's just an alternative history. So yeah, I thought it was really fun. I definitely want to check out the sequels. Probably will try to listen to them on audiobook, because I did really like the audiobook, and I think, you know, it'd be a nice way to consume the series, but we'll see if that happens, just because I'm not really listening to any audio right now. I don't know. But yeah, I highly recommend it if kind of like you want something steampunky, especially science steampunky. I think it's a good, fun series to check out. And again, if you like Lady Trent, it might be a good series to check out. If you like... It reminds me of Gail Carriger a little bit, except Gail Carriger is like really, really extreme on the like absurdism scale, and it's not anywhere near like that absurd. But if you like that kind of thing, you know, I think there's a lot of like crossover appeal. There you go. Then the next thing I read, I decided to go ahead and read, because I had the ebook out and it was expiring, and I decided I'm just going to give it a try. That is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. So I had this checked out from the library because of BookTube SFF Awards. It was nominated for the debut category, which is one of the categories I was going to read. And my loan was expiring, but since it was an ebook, I was like, I'll just try it. I'll read a couple of chapters. If it grips me, I'll just put my app to airplane mode and finish reading it, even if it expires. And I was really shocked by how much this engrossed me. I gave this a 5 stars. That might be over generous, but like, I loved reading this so much. One of the best things I've read this year. It just really, really appealed to me. It's necromancers in space. It kicked off a really bizarre interest in Dark Souls. I've been like watching tons and tons of Dark Souls lore, because it has kind of similar feeling of like empire built upon ruins of things. And anyways, it's about the space empire of necromancers, and there's all these different like ruling houses, and they have been called back to the emperor's home planet, which the emperor is not, he cannot be on this planet, but it is the first house planet, to kind of compete, but mostly just to take to, they're all let loose. The heirs of their houses are on this planet that's actually like basically this research facility where this kind of hand of the emperor necromancy ascendancy was developed, and they're all trying to figure out how to ascend to be the next, I can't remember what they're called. It's not Hand of the Emperor, but it's like Hand of the Emperor. That's the role. They're all trying to figure out how to ascend to that role, or they've been invited to try to figure that out. And there's all these like trials, and there's these labs, and it's all like deserted, and it's this weird universe where they've got all this like necromantic magic and old technology, like old advanced technology that like works, but most of them don't know how to use it. And like they, you know, they have their cavaliers who are like their swordsmen. It's crazy, and I love it. And Gideon is such a irreverent, memey troll, really, and I love her, and I love her head of house. I love the little mystery about what ties them together, why they hate each other, and also like there's a romance in it that I was just tear my heart out. Please crush it under your boots. I don't know. I like literally was staying up all night for a couple of days in a row reading this book. I loved it so much. So anyways, yeah, I read Gideon the Ninth. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did, but I did, and I am so excited for Haro, which comes out today, the day I am filming this. Okay. After that, I read Before Mars by Emma Newman. So this, I've had this on a lot of TBRs. I've been trying to read this since the end of 2019. I've finally read it. Unsurprisingly, I loved it. Gave it 4.5 stars. I thought it was great. I did sort of suspect part of the surprise, but that's fine. This is set pretty much at the same time as After Atlas, which is the previous book in the series, but it's set on Mars. So it's really interesting to read, knowing like all of the shit that's happening on Earth while this is going on. Those two do tie into each other pretty closely. I'd read After Atlas before reading this one, definitely. I know they're all companion novels, but they really probably should be read in publication order. I really love this. It's about a scientist who goes to Mars, and she kind of she's hired by this megacorp that is a key component of After Atlas, and she's there to do some science geology work and also to do these paintings for her boss. And something's awry. She arrives, and there's this she finds this note written in her own hands to herself telling her not to trust one of the other scientists there, and she has no memory of having written it. And most of this book struggles with her fears about kind of mental illness, because her father had a mental breakdown, and it has to do with their personal it's like if your smartphone was a chip in your head, your ADA, personal device, and immersives, which are kind of like internal brain holograms of like shows or memories or video games or whatever. And so she's very concerned with like losing touch on reality. She's also just struggling with now being away from her husband and realizing that she's very unhappy with her marriage and stuff like that. So it was really good. As always, Emma Newman's characters are fantastic in my opinion. I think they're really interesting. They're really flawed. They deal with a lot of stuff I don't usually see in a lot of books. Like mental health issues are a huge aspect of Emma Newman's books, and I think that is amazing. And again, such a good series. Like one of my favorite series I've read this year. It was up for the series award at the Hugos, and of course it lost, and I'm just very sad because this is such a good series. If you're looking for a hard sci-fi near future series of books, seriously, pick these up. There is a fourth book. It's I can't remember what it's called. I think it has to deal with the fallout from After Atlas, which I'm not going to talk about. I don't want to talk about because it would spoil that book and also this book. And I'm very excited to get my hands on that. Not sure when I will, but I'm going to. Then the next thing I finished was, again, for the BookTube SF Awards debut list, A Memory Called Empire by Katie Martine. So I have been trying to get around to reading this since September of last year. I originally had this on my TBR for Space Opera September 2019. Didn't get around to it. I have tried to read it 2 previous times just in this round of BookTube SFF Awards reading. I got it on audiobook, couldn't do the audiobook. Got it on ebook, just didn't get around to reading it. And then this came into the library in physical form like 3 or 4 months later after I'd requested it. My library finally opened to take out during COVID, and I got it, and I decided I'd go ahead and I'd give it 100 pages or whatever, see if I was into it. I did like this. I think I gave it a 4 stars. I was surprised by the fact that I just liked Gideon so much more than this book. I think this book is good. This book is interesting. It is about an ambassador who, from a small, they haven't been annexed into the Empire, but they are on the edges of being annexed by the Empire. So she's the replacement ambassador to the heart of the Empire from her tiny little, mining space station colony. And her predecessor has mysteriously died. And there's a lot of political upheaval in the heart of the Empire. And she's kind of thrown into it with very little knowledge. So basically her people have developed this technology that lets them record their memories and then implant those memories into a successor. And so they create these, what they're called imago lines. And so it's memory lines for professions, so that skill and knowledge is not lost from one generation to the next. Now, her predecessor, the other ambassador, he had an imago, but it was very, very outdated. It was like 15 years out of date. They put that in her, but then it malfunctions. And so she loses all of that little bit of knowledge from him, his outdated imago that she had. And it's really good. I think the relationships between her and the people that she encounters on the planet, her aide de camp, are very interesting. I think the thing about it is that to me it just felt like a weak sauce in the middle, somewhere between like Nine Fox Gambit and Ancillary Justice, but without the action or urgency of either book. And that's unfair. I do think that is an unfair comparison, because both of those are like military sci-fi books, and this is they're military political sci-fi books, and this is just a political sci-fi book. And so I think I just was maybe a little bit less, I just wanted more. I think I wanted something else. There's just a lot of like running around in this book. It's just 500 pages of like someone running around and trying to navigate politics without anything else to it. And I think I just wanted something more to it. So, and reading this, I couldn't help. Like there are these police in this that reminded me so much of the Kells from Nine Fox Gambit. And then the stuff with like the Emperor and the memories kind of reminded me of like the ancillaries and the ancillary Emperor of Ancillary Justice. And I felt like both of those books series were just more interesting and had more going on than this on its own. So yeah, I think it's good. Maybe if you like those, I mean, no, I'm not even going to say it. I don't know. If you want, like, political SFF, pick this up. It's a 4-star. It's not a 5-star. I think that's all I can say. I don't know. I don't know how to quantify my thoughts. But I think ultimately I was reading it going, this is good. But I liked these other things that were doing kind of similar stuff better. That's kind of where I land on that. Okay, and then while I was reading, actually, like, the last 3 books I've mentioned, I was also simultaneously reading In the Cities of Coins and Spice by Catherine M. Valente. This is really long, though. It's her second Orphan Tales book, and it was just taking me a while. So I was reading this very slowly, like just 30 to 40 pages a day. And after finishing this, I decided I needed a break, and I needed to read something short and that I could just read kind of quickly. And so I just kind of scrolled through my Kindle, and I decided to, on a very, very abstract whim, pick up The Murders of Molly Southbourne by Tade Thompson. So this is a Tor.com horror sci-fi novella. I think I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Oh, I gave it 4 stars. I think retrospectively, looking back on it, I'd give it 3.5. I really liked the first half of it, and I was less into the second half. So this is about a girl who, every time she bleeds, a clone or a twin of herself pops out of the ground. And at first, they will be totally, like, normal. Sometimes they'll talk, sometimes they won't, but they always seem to go bad, and they always try to, like, murder her. And so most of the book is, like, her growing up on this remote farm with her family, kind of having to learn how to deal with, like, trying not to bleed, and also, like, killing the Mollies when she does accidentally bleed, she does accidentally create them. And it's trippy and scary. But then, like, the twist, I guess, turns out to not be very scary. And that's kind of the sci-fi element. And so, yeah, I think retrospectively I'd give it 3.5 stars. But I still think it's worth picking up. It is kind of interesting. And it's got an interesting, like, concept behind it. So, yeah. My tiny little forays into sort of horror this year. Who would have thought? Okay, So then I read that. That was like my break book. And then I finished, finally, In the Cities of Coins and Spice. So again, this was on my 20 books to read in 2020 list. This was my June or July pick. I think this was a June pick that I didn't get to. It doesn't matter. I read it. I gave it like a solid 4 stars. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as the first one, but it has also been like 2 or 3 years since I read the first one, so I don't remember it super well. This is sort of inspired by 1001 Tales, Arabian Nights, etc. It is about a girl who lives in a sultan's garden, and the sultan's son finds her, and she has stories written across her eyelids. And her stories are really interesting because they're nested tales. So you'll start out with like the tale of the crossing, and she'll tell a piece of it, and like the character will meet someone else, and then that character, so in this instance, it's a young boy crossing the river Styx basically, and he meets the ferryman, and so then the next thing is the foreman's tale, and then the foreman meets another character, and so then it'll go into the tale of the hungry lord, which explains another character, and then it'll go back, and then you'll meet another character, and they'll tell a piece of their tale, and then it'll go forward into another tale, and then it just there's dozens and dozens of tales, stories, histories, all nested and intertwined with one another. It's a very kind of unique fairy tale duology. It's really good. I think if you're really into fairy tales and you like, I'm not going to say Catherine Valenti's work, because this is definitely stylistically different than several of her more recent novels. But this is very typical of like her older work. If you've read her first short story collection, The Bread We Eat in Dreams, if you're familiar with that, and you like it, definitely pick these up. Maybe if you're a fan of like the Fairyland books too, definitely pick this up, because it's different than space opera. It's different than Radiance, like tonally. It's very different than Deathless, but really, really good. So yeah, 2 books knocked off my 20 to read in 2020 list. Feeling super excited, but we're not done there, because I read another novella at the end of the month. Again, I was reading In the Cities really slowly, and I was just kind of like interspersing it with other things. I didn't want to start a big long novel, so I just was picking up novellas. I picked up another just kind of random novella I had on my Kindle. This is another one I got, I think, free through Tor.com's summer book club. They have a summer book club where they'll give free downloads every month of a book or a novella from their collection. So I picked up The Black Tides of Heaven by Ji Neon Yang, and this is like a companion novella to The Red Threads of Heaven, I think is the other one. And based on like the author's foreword, my understanding is that you can read either of these 2 novellas first, and they are the introduction to like a larger world that Neon's working on. I haven't read The Red Threads of Heaven. This is my first kind of brush with this world, though not my first story from them I've read. I have read at least 1 or 2 short stories from them. I thought this world was really interesting. It's very much feels like kind of like an Avatar or Korra world, where there's something called Slatcraft, which is kind of like elemental magic, and there is an empress who has these children, and she has sworn to give one child to the abbot of the monastery because he helped her with an uprising, a civil unrest thing. But instead of giving him the child that he wanted to take into the monastery, she decides to have another child to pay him off with. And that child turns out to be twins, and so she gives them these 2 discarded twins, basically. But one of them turns out to be a really powerful prophet, and the other one turns out to be kind of just a regular slack crafter. And their paths diverge, and basically this novella is from the perspective of the twin who's not the prophet, and it's kind of just them growing up. And I suspect this isn't the book to start with. I want to read The Red Threads of Heaven because I suspect it's from the other twins' perspective, and I kind of wonder if it makes more sense to read that one first and then this one. I don't know. This one felt kind of incomplete. There were some big time gaps as they were growing up, and it felt like a lot of the really interesting action happened off screen in those time jumps. So again, it was one of those cases where I liked the first half, I think, more than the second half, because the first half there were fewer time jumps, and so it felt like we were getting all of the interesting stuff. But then as the time jumps increased, it felt like I was missing out, and a lot of stuff was happening that I wasn't seeing. So if you like kind of this steampunky magical mishmash of Avatar Korra, I do think this is worth checking out. This also has a lot of really great, interesting kind of gender construction in this world, which I think is great. And like I said, I do want to read the other companion novella because I want to see what my opinion of it is when I've got like more of a whole picture. So yeah, read that. And then to finish out the month, I had one day left. I didn't really want to start a new book because all my books for August are really, really long, but I did want to read something, so I decided to go ahead, and I've got a bunch of short stories bookmarked from past Hugo nominees, basically. So I decided to go ahead and just read a couple of those that I had bookmarked. Have a nice, easy day of it. So I read, and I will leave links to these two short stories down below because you can read both of them online for free. I read A Witch's Guide to Escape, a Practical Compendium of Portal Fantasies. This was published by Apex, and it's written by Alex Ihara. She recently wrote, the 10,000 Doors of January. I gave this 4 stars. It's pretty interesting. It's about a witch, a witch who's a librarian, and it's about putting the right books into people's hands when they need them. So I also read The Rose McGregor Drinking and Admiration Society by T. Kingfisher. This one's published by Uncanny Magazine, and this is a very, very short story. This is a very, very short story about. Usually it's about trope subversions. Usually it's about fae loving and leaving maidens, but this is about a maiden who loved and left a lot of fae. And it's funny. Just kind of diverting. It's like 6 pages, But anyways, I will leave those down below if you are interested in checking either of those short stories out. Thanks so much for watching. This has been a really long wrap up, but I read a lot. And I'm like really happy with how much I read. I think I averaged 97 pages in July, which is amazing. And I just made so much good progress on some of my challenges. I'm just, yes. I also read like multiple books that were over 500 pages, which again, such a triumph for me because that is so hard. Anyways, I have to now go run and return a couple of these books to the library, so I'm going to go do that, and I'll see you guys in my next video.